What's up? Miles here. Today I'm going to tell you my 5 favorite books. Ever since I was around 11 years old, I've been a huge bookworm. It all started when my mom forced me to get through the very boring first chapter of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and finish the whole book. And since then, I've been absolutely hooked on phonics, I guess you could say. I love reading. I love getting lost in the story. Over the years, my preferences for books have changed a bit, though. I used to be huge into fiction, starting with, the magical world of Harry Potter. And in the past 3 or 4 years, I've really pretty much completely transitioned over to, I guess you could say, self-development kind of books. So whether it be philosophical, spiritual, and just autobiographies, things like that. Anything that I feel can help make my life a little bit better. Occasionally I'll read a fiction book, but in this list that I'm going to give right now, it's pretty much all going to be self-development kind of related books. So without further ado, I'll get started. Number 5, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If you've ever seen the movie Gladiator, you've probably heard of Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor in the beginning who was killed by Joaquin Phoenix's character. But in real life, Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. He was one of the last, I guess, good Roman emperors. I guess that's what they called them, meaning that he did a great job of running the Roman Empire. And he was also a practicing Stoic philosopher, I guess you could say. Well, he wasn't a philosopher, but he practiced the philosophy of Stoicism. And Stoicism was an ancient Greek and Roman philosophy. It started in Greece that, I guess you could say, preached virtue as a means to happiness. So it wasn't a metaphysical philosophy talking about why things are the way they are, but trying to pursue the best way towards happiness. And that was achieved through things like practicing virtue and using objective and rational judgment. Meditations was actually not a philosophy book at first. It was just Marcus Aurelius's own notes to himself. He kept like a journal of reminding himself of these Stoic virtues that he should practice. Some of the different things he tries to remind himself of in Meditations is to use objective and rational judgment when facing difficult situations, to be patient with people who might test his patience. He also talked a lot about being present and fully in the moment, which is something I really like, and just in general, the mindsets and kind of beliefs that Stoicism preached you should have in order to live a happy, healthy life. This is a book that I turn to quite often when I'm going through tough or challenging times because of its focus on rational, objective judgment and I guess being present to the moment, you could say. It really helps you get a sense of perspective on problems and different things you're going through. If you're dealing with any, challenges, which most of us do in life, I definitely recommend taking a look at this book. There's some passages in it which I just kind of ignore because they don't really make much sense, but you can definitely find some value in it no matter what situation you're in. Number 4, The Alabaster Girl by Zan Perion. The Alabaster Girl is pretty different than the other books on this list, mainly because it is written by a dating coach. And that probably has some bad connotations for a lot of people. And I will admit, I first got this book because I thought it might contain some tips or ideas on how to get more women into my life. It did, but not in the way that I thought it would. So I guess the way I would describe this book is as a wise man's half fiction, half non-fiction description of his own very inspirational life philosophy. So it wasn't a book about what to say to women to get them to like you, or how to sleep with this such and such girl. It was a book about his love for beauty. And beauty is the central theme of this book, and it is the theme that I got most out of it. He says he seeks out beauty in pretty much every situation in life. That's his guiding force in life. It's his North Star, I guess you'd say. And I don't know whether it was the poetic style of writing. It's very flowery. I enjoy it, but a lot of people probably won't. Or just the passion with which he wrote. But when I read those words 4 years ago, it really made me realize just how much I I wanted beauty and passion and adventure in my life. And it kind of was my major inspiration behind my blog, which is called An Appetite for Beauty, and really for trying to move my life abroad, to have an adventure, to have something magical in my life. Number 3, we're switching back now to more self-development oriented material. And number 3 is the Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient Hindu scripture that was originally written in Sanskrit. The Bhagavad Gita is basically a guide on how to find enlightenment, or self-realization is what they call it. You may be asking, well, what if I don't care about reaching enlightenment or self-realization or anything like that? What if I just want to read something that'll kind of help me be a little bit happier? This book is actually just the thing for you. It is also, in my opinion, a great guide for living a happy, fulfilled life. Some of the themes that it talks about are self-realization, of course, which we covered, selfless service, which is basically just acting without your ego attached to your actions. It talks about meditation and the importance of different kinds of meditation. And it also talks about right action, which is the correct action for the time and place that you're in. So learning how to differentiate between wrong action, which is usually influenced by the ego, and right action, which is coming from a higher place, I guess you'd call it. I would say that the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from this book since I read it, I think 2 or 3 years ago, is this whole idea of selfless action or selfless service. And as I said, it's acting without your ego attached to your actions. So that means taking the me out of everything you do. So to hammer this point home, I'm going to give one quote for it, and that is, "You have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work. You should never engage in action for the sake of reward, nor should you long for an action." So that's one of my favorite quotes of all time. I keep it hung up on my wall right over here, that little box. And it just reminds me to try and take my ego out of my actions, and to either be really present to the moment in what I'm doing, or if I can't do that, try and focus on how my actions can benefit other people. It's a great motivator, and it's a great way to kind of get in a flow state when taking action. I highly recommend this book. If you can take an objective look at it without getting too caught up in all the religious imagery and vocabulary, I guess you'd say, I think you could find a lot of value in it. Book number 2, the Tao Te Ching. So I actually just made a video on Taoism, which is the Chinese philosophy that is based off of this book. So the Tao Te Ching is an ancient Chinese book or scripture written by I guess you would say mythical, because nobody knows if he really existed, Lao Tzu. And the basic premise of the Tao Te Ching is how to live in accordance with the Tao, which is kind of hard to explain. One of the main verses in the Tao Te Ching is, "The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao." So basically, if you can talk about it or you can describe it, you don't really know what you're talking about. So how do we figure out what Taoism or the Tao Te Ching is talking about? Well, they roughly translated the Tao to mean the way or the path, which is basically just very similar to the Bhagavad Gita, the way to enlightenment, or the way to live a happy, fulfilled, I guess, enlightened kind of life. Some of the major themes in the Tao Te Ching are flowing with nature, or the natural way things operate, so flowing with reality. Yin and yang, the opposites basically. So there's good and there's bad, there's light and there's dark, there's empty and there's full. You can't have one without the other. That's just the way the world works. It talks about non-action or non-doing, which is called wu wei in Chinese, I believe. And that's basically very similar to what I talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, is taking action without concern for the result, not being attached to the outcome, without having your ego invested in it. A couple other big themes are letting go, so detachment from objects, from people, from situations, even emotions, and stillness, finding that peace within yourself, learning to be content in each moment. This book has been pretty huge in helping me become a much more laid back and relaxed person, enjoying the moment and just kind of going with the flow in life. So I highly recommend it to anybody who might feel a little stressed or just looking for a more relaxed mindset to carry with them. Number 1, my all-time favorite book, other than Harry Potter, of course, That is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I already made a whole video on The Power of Now and why I love it so much, so I won't go into too much detail here, but if you don't know, Eckhart Tolle is a spiritual teacher and author who talks about enlightenment or finding enlightenment, but in less esoteric form or terms. So whereas in the Bhagavad Gita, everything's surrounded by religious imagery, or the Tao Te Ching's kind of hard to understand in general, Power of Now is very direct and to the point. And basically says that enlightenment is simply being present to the moment, or being free from the thinking mind. Throughout the book, he talks about our main cause of suffering in our life, which is the ego or the thinking mind. He talks about why it causes so much pain. He talks about how to get rid of it, which is through getting present to the moment. And then he goes on to go into a lot of detail about different ways to get rid of the ego, how to be present to the moment, and all the obstacles you might face along the way. I gotta say, this book absolutely changed my life. Before reading it, I was a very happy, or unhappy, miserable person. A lot of negative thoughts going on in my head, a lot of just emotions that I didn't know how to handle. And this book really helped me take a step back. It didn't erase my negative thinking or anything like that, but it helped me realize that my thoughts don't control me, they don't define me, and that I can find peace regardless of what's going on in my life. So I highly recommend this book for anybody, everybody actually. This is the one book, I don't like telling people you should read this, you should read that, but this book, without a doubt, if you're in the right place for it, can change your life. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe found some books that you hadn't read before. If you've read these and have any input you want to add to the video, feel free to comment. And as always, thank you for watching, and see you soon.